Oh, thank you, Missy. So thinking how you are going to provide these services to gifted students, to ELLs, to gifted ELLs is essential. How are you assessing the supports you are providing? It's important for you to be aware of the Martinez and Yazzie consolidated lawsuit. Um, in that, in that lawsuit, the First Judicial District Court ruled deficiencies in the education of at-risk students, including failing to provide culturally and linguistically responsive instruction. English learners score lower than non-English learners in reading and math, and English learners generally take fewer advanced courses and have lower graduation rates. So what are you going to do at your school to make sure your ELs are advancing and progressing? For our application, you have to be aware of this and speak to this. If your school is going to offer fine arts activities to elementary school students, you can qualify for fine arts funding. And, of course, this isn't just art class, it's more involved, visual arts, music, theater, dance. Funds will be distributed only to districts and charter schools that have approved applications. So you would contact Erica Wheeler here at PD if you would like more information on this. And once you are approved and enter your IY, well, if you are approved and enter your implementation year, you can apply. So physical education is another factor in the 910B5 that factors into the overall amount of the SEG given to you. Um, the physical education funding program described here was never fully funded, so you won't be applying for funds, but physical education is factored into your overall SEG number. I think that makes sense. That from what I've learned from it, that funding was never funded. And here's more about physical ed that you can read through if you want. So beginning in fiscal year 24, no school in a district with more than 2,000 students will receive small school units. The small district factor in the funding formula provides additional funding for school districts with fewer than 4,000 students. So 74 of the 89 traditional public school districts. To qualify, the public education department must certify the district has implemented practices to reduce inefficiencies, such as sharing services through a regional education cooperative. Okay, that concludes the public school funding section. Any questions for me or Missy before we move on to advice from a peer reviewer?
I have a question. So you mentioned that you need to apply for the fine arts program. Is that after approval?
Yeah, that would be after if you're
Yeah.
approved and you enter your IY year.
Okay, great. Thanks.
The question is that for like languages, are there more languages than what you listed? And also for the physical education, what kind of approval? So if we can add some more programs in there. And the second one question was the fine art. Is that like a program extra on top that we have to apply for it besides that what you are implementing that's supposed to be there?
So I can take that. So that's just an example of the current languages that are being taught, with English learners around the state. There's a myriad of other languages that could be a possibility. It's just trying to help you all understand that English language learners does not just mean children who Spanish is their first language. let's see, the next question was,
Physical ed.
PE. So, you have to, the, the, the statute, the rule, the curriculum requirements, that's all the floor. You can have more than that, but you can't have less than the basics of what the state requires for curriculum. And then the third thing was what?
It was Erica Wheeler,
Oh yeah,
general,
Erica Wheeler's art stuff. So yes, the fine arts, it's not just we're going to have art classes for our kids. It's a particular it's a step above having standard art classes. It's that you want to have an actual program, a fine arts program.
It's like, I know, it's like, I may ask you something about the opening of the school. So we actually are gonna be submitting the final application in June 1st. And then actually we're gonna open on August 1st. Is that what I'm just like?
No, so you would apply on June 1st. Then it's reviewed by an independent peer review team. Then there's a community input hearing the week of July 6th, where we come to each applicant's community and have a meeting. And then August 21st, the commissioners would vote on whether or not to allow you to enter into your implementation year. And then the implementation year starts September 1. The earliest your school would be open would be July of 2027.
So how about the finding of the building? Because I was under the impression that we have to open in August, and so I'm looking for building
No, you
seriously.
have to, sorry, no, so you would not open until August of 2027. You won't receive state funds until July of 2027. The commencement of operation to open would be June of 2027. The commencement to go into your implementation year and your planning year is August of 2026. So the facilities master plan activity is due April 1st. But that's just, you don't actually have to have a building. You just have to understand, you have to kind of do a practice run with the facilities master plan.
Like almost, I already submit like a couple of offers and buildings, by the way. I'm just like,
I'm sorry that
okay.
you misunderstood that.
So the second question is that we don't have to look for a building till like next year, actually. We have time on the building thing.
So it depends on how
Because it is a critical thing is the building thing, because it's like with that money is like, because you're gonna spend money on that. Even we spend already on money on the websites and stuff like this. We already prepare that, but that's maybe me. But I'm
so
talking building wise, prepare things like business wise.
yeah, so the schools that are they're currently in the implementation year, one of them already had a building before they applied, before they put in their notice of intent. So they had a building already. The other school, this is their second implementation year. So so during their first implementation year, it took them until I think it was April or May, it took them to find a building. So then they had a building then for their second implementation year. Then the third school down in Las Cruces has just got their building situation settled this month. So it takes time. You can be approved to enter your implementation year. You could get the CSP grant. You could have enrolled students, filling in your lottery forms, wanting to do that. But if you don't have a location, you just don't get to open. We had a school that went through implementation year, got a building, had to do a lot of changes to get e-occupancy, and they were not able to get e-occupancy in time for opening in August. And they basically ran a daycare for another month before they had their e-occupancy. So they were not getting reimbursed by the state. They weren't getting any SEG from the state for a month. If you don't have a building, you don't get money.
How about if because we are hybrid, so we're gonna do online and we can open the first like year on that thing as taking a school and then using the website that we are doing and implement that like as online learning in the first beginning year on that year that doesn't require a building from us.
Well, you're
Uh,
welcome. You're welcome to propose that in your application. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Perfect.
So,
That's it.
Yeah, I would put that in the application because you don't want to throw your authorizer off by saying you're going to be in school at the beginning, but you're actually fully online.
no, you would absolutely have to, it would be part of the contract. We need to know, you are asked, are you going to be 100% online, 100% in person, or some type of, and so you would have to be 100% in online, moving to a hybrid. So that's how you would want to be stating it. Lisa Marie?
Um, I wanted to just double check. So, as far as with everything that you are all saying, and based upon our application, so as long as everything that our plans, regardless in the future, regardless if we don't get it going up right now, for a certain segment, let's say, how we write it, let's say we have 6th through 12th grade and whatever the situation may be, but as long as it's in the application, because we can't ever go back to go and say, hey, we're going to add this, or is there an addendum, or do we just put everything that we're going to do or what our plans are in the actual initial application?
Personally, I think that that's best to because you might recall, I'm sure I've said to you, because I say it to every NOI group, you really should be writing the application
Mhm.
as if you had to hand it off to Murad, and Murad, you had to hand it off to Lisa Marie, right? Like, so you're writing your idea, your plan, what you want in a way that somebody who isn't you can come and implement that, no questions asked. They open up the book and they're like, okay, this is step one, etc. You can, so say you're 612, you can say, we're going to be a 612 with 1,000 kids. We're going to start with grade 6, 7, and 8. And then we will add a grade every year moving, throughout. That would be better. You could also say, we're going to have a 6, 7, 8 school and then get that under your belt. And then you'd have to come back to the commission and ask to amend. But you wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't want to do that in your second year because you'd want to have that ninth graders, right? You'd want to be growing at that each year. So you do want to try to encapsulate all of what your vision is and what your plan is. It doesn't necessarily have to be implemented in year one that you've started it. The thing that the commissioners will catch up on is things like, if you, like I said before, one of our applicant teams said, we are absolutely going to be working with the Air Force Base Alamogordo. But then they were approved, and then in their planning year, when they were writing about what they were going to do, they left that out. And the commission held them to that. They were like, no, we approved you because you said you were going to be working with these entities. And now you're backtracking. So that's, don't put in there that you're going to have like a fine arts program and then cut the fine arts program in the next, stage of the application process, the implementation year. So if you're saying it in your NOI submission application, and it has to do with your academic program and your mission and your location, the student population you want to serve, don't change any of that. That's where they don't want to have a sense that they're getting a bait and switch.
Thank you. I just wanted to just get a little bit more clarification. I remember
No,
you
it's
saying
just-
all that. I just wanted like a little bit more because there were some other things that we're tweaking and implementing. So as we finalize everything, so I just wanted to make sure we're,
Yeah.
since my team and I are online here, we could all hear it together.
Yeah. And I answered your question
Did you?
in your email. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.
yeah, and let me just tell everybody else, because it was a good question to ask. So Lisa Marie had asked, there's a new founding member that I want to have on our team, and what do I need to do about adding them? And on our end, you don't have to add anything to your notice of intent submission that you gave us. There is a place within the application where you will list out your team, and it doesn't necessarily have to match what your NOI says, right? You can add people, and people come and go, life happens. So that's the appropriate thing to do if you have any more founding team members that are joining you before the application is turned in. And then after the application is turned in, if you've got changes in board members and things like that, we have a process for that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Yeah. All right, Ted, go ahead.
All right. So I know you just kind of went over this a little bit, but I had a note here to go over the timeline just a little bit. So after you hand in your application no later than June 2nd, CSD will check for completeness and send the applications off to the PEC. Meanwhile, a peer review team will be assigned to it, and they will review all the parts. Then a capacity interview will take place. We have those online with your proposed school and your peer review team. And then the team will make an analysis of the application and the capacity interview that we had online and provide that to the applicant team and to the PEC. So those are your upcoming steps. And then after that, it moves on to the applicant team can submit a written response by July 7th, and we move on to community input hearings in the town of which you will be open, public comments, more analysis, and PEC decision making in person on August 16th. Okay, so charter reviewers seriously read and dissect the financial and board portions of the charter document, and they dissect the academic portion as well. Our peer reviewers have a lot of experience with charter schools in New Mexico. They've been teachers, head administrators, business managers, they have board experience. They will be the ones reviewing your application. These are experienced educators in New Mexico, so keep that in mind. Remember that a professional school business manager is on the review team. In the past, it appears that some applicants do not do this, as the narrative and the budgets are far out of alignment. So it is imperative that the person who is writing the narrative and the person who is completing the SEG worksheets and the 5-year budget worksheets work together and talk to each other. Does the budget support what you say you're going to provide in the narrative? So yeah, make sure people who are working on different parts are communicating. That's why it can be valuable to have a team. UCOA stands for the Unified Code of Accounting. It's easier for the reviewer if you put the UCOA code, account code, when they are mentioned. So for example, here we will spend 100,000 for student computers. This is budgeted under, and there's your UCOA code. Expenditures cannot exceed revenue. You cannot use prior year carryover cash for recurring expenditures. So if you are going to use carryover cash, it needs to be for one-time expenditures, not reoccurring. Using the $100,000 computers example, their narrative should state something like, this purchase will be a one-time purchase and the school plans to use carryover cash for this purchase. The application needs to include strong internal controls addressing all accounting, financial, and human resources tasks. Please read through statute and code regarding internal controls. There needs to be policies and procedures to ensure the money at your school is spent properly. This is ensured through internal controls, segregation of duties, cash deposited within the required time frame. This is a responsibility of the finance committee. How will the finance committee monitor internal controls to make sure they are happening? It's required. How often will they do this? And how and when will they report this to the full board? If you have a small school, there probably won't be enough employees to ensure segregation of duties. It gets a little more tricky. So in that case, the board is expected to jump in and fill that void and put themselves into the purchasing process at some point. Because if one person controls all facets of a purchase, the ordering, receiving, the paying, you are more likely to have fraud and manipulation. So be sure membership numbers are reasonable. Keep in mind that New Mexico is seeing a decrease in student population. If you say you're going to have 100 students, then you need to say how you are going to go about that and how you are getting to that number. People who build and generate community support are much more likely to hit or get close to their expected membership numbers. I know Missy has told me that since she's been here since 2017, not one school has hit their projected number. And only if
One school did,
oh
and
really?
that was last year.
Oh, okay.
It was the first
Uh,
time. Sun Mountain
and
Community School, which was a Waldorf-based
oh,
school, actually met their goal. So it
and
did happen.
that's kind of because they already had a school before, and so they kind of have that list ready
Exactly.
to go.
They
Yeah.
had a student population.
Yeah. Peer reviewers have access to a lot of information, the same research information that the charter writers have, if not more. So keep this in mind when you're making statements of where you are getting your information. If the charter document states that we're using Rio Rancho's district's percentage of special ed numbers, we will get those numbers from Rio Rancho District. If those numbers are different from the percentages you are using in your narrative and your SEG revenue worksheet projections, you need to change your narrative or your worksheet or explain why you're not using what you say you are using. If your narrative states that you have 15% level CD special ed students, then be sure that the SEG worksheet has 15% level CD students, and make sure ancillary numbers are reasonable. So if the charter document states 15% of level CD special ed population and then budgets for 5 full-time equivalent ancillary teachers, that's not reasonable. For staffing, making sure that the people writing different components of the application are communicating. If you are saying you'll have 10 regular ed teachers and 3 special ed teachers, make sure that's reflected on the budget worksheet. So if you say we will hire, just make sure the salaries are reasonable. If you state 300,000 for salaries for 10 teachers, that averages 30,000 per teacher. That is not reasonable. Make sure the mandatory minimums are reflected. And make sure the minimums are reflected in your teacher cost index for years 2 through 5 of your 5-year budget plan. The calendar will be scrutinized by the reviewers and by the commission and if you get approved by the school budget bureau. Consider including the calculations you make for total number of instructional hours, especially if not all school days are identical in instructional hours. Okay, so be sure anything that is legally required is in your bylaws. Bylaws are your rule book, your guidance document, and your protection. If you have a bylaw that states how to remove a board member, you follow those steps and do it properly to protect yourself from a future possibly disgruntled board member. In your bylaws, you could have something about attending a certain percentage of meetings. So if a member isn't doing that, you can now easily remove them. We hear sometimes hear bylaws should be updated every 10 years. That never sounds right to me, to check your bylaws every decade. If it's too big of a lift to look at one, if it's too big of a lift, look at one bylaw meeting. I know several schools last year that have told me they look at one bylaw or one policy a meeting, so it's not such a huge lift and it's more manageable. And while we're talking about it, if the application requires you to list board members, and it's okay if that list changes, like Missy said earlier, later on in your implementation year, if you're approved. Many schools indicate in their bylaws that they will abide by statute and rule. In particular, the board recognizes that the following New Mexico statutes and rules are applicable to public charter schools, and each member commits to take necessary steps to become familiar with these provisions, as well as provisions of applicable laws and rules for the Charter School Act, the School Personnel Act, the Procurement Code, the Open Meetings Act, the Public School Finance Act, and the New Mexico Public Education Regulations. Some schools have this sort of catch-all bylaw that encompasses everything. This is an enormous amount of information, and some may not be applicable to your school. For instance, Title VI has 102 chapters in it alone. What exactly in Title VI of NMAC is the school going to ensure they follow? There are specialized areas of statute and code, and now you're saying you're going to follow all of it. How might a school know what parts of Title VI NMAC their authorizer cares about? So make sure that you understand which positions require a PED license and what is required to obtain that license. For instance, the executive director needs to have a level 3B administrator's license. An ancillary service provider needs a New Mexico boards and regulations license for their specialty, as well as a PED license. There are no shortages of requirements. That wraps up chapter 2. It feels like we're moving pretty quickly, but don't worry, the academic framework is a monster, and we're about to go into that. So any questions for me or Missy before we take the long Frodo journey into the academic framework?
All right, and why don't I just take over the entire academic framework, Ted?
Okay.
I do want to, I've been working on an email that I'm sending to one of the schools that's currently in their implementation year about their facility, because they found a facility, but it has a weighted NMCI number that's higher than the state average. And so an existing school is already there, but I think that's going to put the kibosh on this school being able to have that as their location, which is really going to hurt at this stage in the game. So there's a lot of moving parts in all of this. All right, but let's see. Maybe I should share, or do you want to just change the screens? Do you
I
want to do
can
this?
change them for you.
Okay, you can do the slides.
Yeah.
All right, so next slide. All right, so I do want you to pay attention to the rubric. Each question has what the indicator is, and then a laundry list of bullet points that we are expecting. I think that you've got to keep also in mind that you have two types of mindsets reading this application. Three, actually. You have three mindsets reading this application. You have the peer reviewers who need to know and need to rate you on each bullet point. And so putting things in that format is helpful to them. You have the public education commissioners who really want to know why you're passionate about this. And then you've got the charter schools division who is looking at it going, how in the heck am I going to be able to oversee that they're doing what they say they're going to do? So those are the three main entities that you are writing for, which doesn't make this task any easier. So be sure to review the rubric to make sure you understand what you're going to need to do in order to get a meets the criteria. You want to get as many meets the criteria, obviously, as you possibly can. All right, so next slide. So your mission. Now, there are a few things that are not rated as meets, working to meet, or not meeting. And one is your vision and the mission. I think we don't rate it, but we say you put it in there, right? Because we're not saying, well, your mission is miserable, right? We're not saying that to you. So you have to identify how the proposed school will achieve its mission, discuss the importance of your mission in your proposed community, be clear, concise, innovative, and measurable, and discuss what the mission success will look like. Now, the commissioners want, and so this, again, like you could have put in your NOI what the mission of your school is to have lifelong learners, that type of thing, right? You can, at this stage, reimagine that into something more measurable. And I would highly recommend you consider doing that. Another thing to keep in mind, though, say you want to be a school that is producing students with excellent academic outcomes. The Public Education Commission academic framework that we're about to go over is really going to capture a lot of academic information. So they don't like academic goals in the mission goal per se that are going to be duplicative of what they're going to get through the statewide assessment. So just be mindful of that. We've got a lot of schools that are trying to do like a social emotional learning goal, which is perfectly fine and appropriate. If it's going to be the gold standard is, something that's going to be measurable on some type of like nationally normed rubric, but you can have more school specific rubrics as well. You will have to be thinking about how your mission is impacting all of your kids, not just the graduating class, so to speak. Next slide. The vision statement, again, we want to have this, but we're rating you that you've done it. So you either get that it was provided or it wasn't provided, but we don't evaluate it. And this is really a good place for you to put your vision and why your team wants to do this incredibly heavy lift. All right, next slide. Uniqueness and innovation. So this is important. It's all important, but really be thinking about how your program is unique and innovative for your area, right? So it doesn't need to be like you're the first one in the state of New Mexico, but your program is is unique to that geographical area, that community, that's legitimate. Be sure you're describing the needs of the community, and how you know what the needs of the community are, right? So what outreach have you done already to understand what the grassroots call is in your areas for your school? So again, the more evidence you have, the better off it is for you. I have to say, over the years, we hear loads and loads of time, don't I know how hard it is to find board members. And I do know how hard it is to find board members. You are reaching out to businesses and community members who should be hoping will want to serve on your board, right? You shouldn't be looking to just have parents who are going to be serving on board. You want business owners in your community should be engaged and want your school to be successful because they want to be employing those kids, or they want your school to be an opportunity for their employees. So this is an excellent time to be building those bridges. So you don't come to me and say, okay. So next slide. Now, these are your mission specific goals. You should be thinking about this from the standpoint of a measurable goal for all of your students. If any of you are going to be the proposed head administrator, think about the number of goals that you want to do. This is an annual task. You will have to report to the board. You will have to report to the charter schools division. You will have to use a reporting template. So you have to write 2 goals for this task. I'm going to highly, highly, highly recommend that you do 1 goal for, if you get approved, because it's a lot. It's a lot of reporting, a lot of data crunching. Now, it can be hard to think about a K-12 school and what's the goal going to be for the entirety of the school that I can write. So there are schools that have K-12 that have a goal, that's one overarching goal that is measured in different ways for different students. So like we have a classical academy out in Gallup, and I don't remember what the goal is, but what I say for examples are that it's, you have to memorize the Constitution or part of the Constitution. All right. So the kindergartners, that could be drawing a picture of what they believe the Constitution means, or that could be that they memorize the first part of the preamble. And then, first graders doing something else, second graders, all the way up to the 12th graders who have maybe, to go to Washington, D.C. and go to the Capitol or something so it's something that it's the same goal, but it's measured in different ways. But you do have to do 2 goals so you can, talk about but it would be better to think about a whole school goal and then a single group goal. Like if you, wanted to know that your last, say you have a 12th grade, your 12th graders do a thing, you can do that type of thing. So you want to definitely make sure you're aligned to the mission, that you can see, you can understand your mission in your goals. You want to use the SMART format. What you'll be working on in your implementation year would be a results-based accountability model. So you can also be thinking about that as you build it in, but we just didn't put it into the new application that we like an RBA, but I'm telling you that you should be looking at it from a results-based analysis, as well as the SMART format. Include measures and metrics. So again, the typical way that we write goals with charter schools, and goals are part of their contracts. So you can look at people's contracts at existing schools that are out there and see what their goals are in their contract. But we always have them make a statement such as students enrolled on the 40th day and the 120th day, because that is an official count. Those are official count days, and we only want you to be measuring your goal for kids that are with you for the majority of an academic year, right? So we don't want you to be stressed or worried about a kid who left you mid-year or a kid who joined you mid-year, and getting them to a place that they're going to be successful. You would still want to be doing the work with them internally at the school, right? And they should still experience the mission, and they should take whatever the assessment is, but you don't have to count them in your reporting template. So next slide. Theodore.
Didn't it switch?
Oh, it did. Sorry. Curriculum education, student performance standards. So this is where we're asking you to describe your curriculum. What are you going to use? Right. So if you've got a specific pedagogy like Montessori, that's half your work's done. You just have to write about that. So what type of curriculum are you planning on using? Is there research-based evidence? Within this, you want to make sure that within the whole application, if you're going to use an acronym, be sure to spell it out and then put what the acronym is. I would highly recommend that you do that throughout. If you're talking about the same acronym throughout multiple indicators, to always write it out the first time and then use the acronym, just because the commissioners don't know all of these acronyms, and neither will the peer reviewers. So it just makes it easier for them. So if you're not going to be using, high quality instructional materials as deemed by the state of New Mexico, you would want to talk about and describe how your proposed curriculum is going to meet all the requirements of the state law, and of, how is your curriculum going to do a better job than anybody else that's been trying to teach kids in the state of New Mexico? How is it going to align to Common Core? How does it align to your mission and your vision? So include a reasonable timeline and plan development. So this is, a timeline that would be like, we get approval in August of 2026. In September of 2026, I'm going to be, having my team research curriculum, or, we know what we're going to have, so we can start writing out our lesson plans. What's the timeline? Or, we're going to start looking at different types of curriculum that we will want to include. And we will have the curriculum all ready and written and available by, December 15th or whatever, whatever your timeline is. So if you do have, if you are going to be building it, your own curriculum, again, like, you have to, that timeline and detail should be a little bit more robust. You should have scope and sequence, unit plans, daily lesson plans, project plans, rubrics, and unit and course assessments. Next slide. All right, sorry. I have to forward something to my boss. Bilingual multicultural education. So if there's big acts that you have to address, the bilingual multicultural education is one of them. So just read through all of these acts. We tell you exactly where they are in statute throughout the presentation. Read through what the law is requiring. And again, remember, law is always the floor. You can always do more, but you have to at least do the basic floor that the law is requiring. So how are you going to meet those state academic content and standards and benchmark areas and all the subject areas? How is your school going to be teaching all of your students about the benefits, the wonderful things about all the other cultures and languages? Next slide. So there's the multicultural, there's the Hispanic, there's the Black Ed. So this is the Hispanic, and there's also the Indian Ed. So again, how are you going to be addressing the needs? The Martinez and Yazzie lawsuit is all about this. Our state has been traditionally underserving the Hispanic population, the Native population, the Black population, the special education, the gifted population. So there are gaps. You are asking to inherit gaps because that's the students we have. So how is your program going to fill these gaps that these students have in these different areas? That's the important critical part here. Really, how is your special sauce going to do a better job in increasing graduation rates, closing those achievement gaps, getting kids to proficiency? Next slide. Same with the Black Education Act. Now, Black Education Act is got a lot more in it that the public education department has to do as opposed to individual schools, but you're still addressing the needs of those student populations. In addition, you also would have to have, more training for staff around the Black Education Act. So how are you implementing anti-racism training for teachers and staff? That is a requirement in the law. So you have to have anti-racism policies, and you have to have a curricula that recognizes and teaches Black culture and anti-racism, and implement anti-racism training, and provide opportunities to explore identities. That's the truth for all of these acts. Next slide. So when you see things repeated in law, it means that laws were made and nobody followed them. And so when laws are made and nobody follows them, more laws are made. So for the women in the room, it's Title IX. There's so many different places where they'll talk about equality in sports, not just in Title IX, because Title IX happened and then people didn't do anything about it. So same with this, how are you going to have an equity council? I would have preferred the state to do a different thing, but you're going to have to talk about what how you're going to find your equity council. You cannot get an equity council until you have students. So what you need to be talking about in here is like, what's your board's plan for filling this requirement? You will have students enrolling, and you have to base your equity council on the demographics of the school. That's going to change every year, right? So that's one thing to think about. At what point in the year does the board want the head administrator to tell them what the makeup of the demographics of the student population is, and does our equity council still meet that demographic need, or do we need to recruit a new member to the equity council? A lot of schools, their equity council is made up entirely of staff. That is not the intention of the Martinez and Yazzie lawsuit. The intention was not to turn to the people who have been dedicated and working hard to provide educations to all of their students and ask them why they haven't done it better. The intention for this is to really be engaging with entities that are set up to serve this population or the population themselves, right? So you want to know, how can we do a better job for your child, Miss Brown? We know you're low income. So if I'm a low income parent, am I going to want to serve on your equity council in order to give my opinions as to how I want, my child's education to be? Or do I maybe have to work a couple of jobs? And maybe I have some language barriers. So it's not trying to get, parents that are struggling or teachers that are working really hard to help you guide the school to do a better outreach and provide better services to all of your students. So everybody has an opinion about public education, and this should be a great opportunity for people to provide you with feedback. And it's an annual thing. So there's copious amount of information on the PED website about what the Equity Council is supposed to do on an annual basis. And I highly recommend reading through that as you write this response. Next. Graduation requirements. So if you aren't having a 12th grade, you don't have graduation requirements. So you won't have to answer this it's only if we are graduating a 12th grade class. So if you aren't serving that population, you would just put not applicable. But if you are, you have to have a plan. Next slide. So what is your teaching and instructional philosophy? That's what this question wants to get at. Again, what we've had in the past are schools that, be like, we're going to be a single grade. This is what we do. This is our philosophy, single grade classrooms. And then they'll open up and they have budget constraints, and then they're going to have a combined first and second grade because they need to fiscally. And that's just not allowed. You cannot do that type of thing. You don't have that kind of flexibility with public money. So think about that. You can't just clobber together a couple of grades and have one teacher because you don't have the enrollment. So be mindful of your teaching philosophy and what that, you have to have one, but it is also a limiter for you. Next slide. The yearly calendars. So we ask for a number of different types of calendars, but we definitely need, your annual calendar is going to be the start date and the end date. You have to include the professional days, development days you're going to have in there for your teachers. Is it a half day, full day? What is it? That's what we mean by times, not like from 8 a.m. to noon, right? It's like, well, I guess if you had a half day professional development plan like that, we're talking about that. When you're going to do your school-wide assessment periods, And then what's a school day, what's a holiday, what's a partial day, and any teacher-parent conference days. Next. So then there's the daily schedule. This is where you would put in, drop off is at this time, first period's at this time, lunch is at this time, recess, those types of things. So when you're doing instruction, when you're doing breaks, the start of the day, the end of the day, and then what's the difference between a full day and a half day type of schedule. Next slide. So the yearly calendar and daily schedule, you have to have all of the minimum hour requirements that are laid out in statute. God, we used to have to count the hours. It was just horrible. Charter schools doesn't do that anymore, but school budget, I believe they will count to make sure that you have the correct number of hours. You want to describe how the calendar and schedule support your proposed school's educational program, how it's optimal for achieving high outcomes. I find that interesting because I'm sure many of you have seen the research that's done. There's been loads of research done on how older kids do better with a later start date. And yet nobody's really, some traditional school districts have switched to have a later start date for their high schools. But not everybody. So, just like there's research out there, use it. If you're going to have an extended learning time program, you want to describe that in this section. If you're in elementary school, if you're going to participate in the K-5 plus or extended learning, you have to describe it here and provide it in your calendar for your year 2, and you also include it in your budget. And how does the calendar support the community values? So we have a school up in Taos that for years was really struggling with their attendance, and they have a high Native population, and they decided to work with the Taos Pueblo to develop their calendars so that it took into account the important days on the Taos Pueblo calendar. So, that type of thinking about your community is always appreciated. Oh, is this chat question for me? Yes,
No.
use the template that will be provided to.
No.
Thank you, Lucy. Next slide. So how is your instruction going to be effective with your population? So you really do need to understand the demographic information of the population that you're proposing to serve. Where are they proficient? Where are they lacking typically? Is there good attendance with the demographic that you're intending to serve? Or is there a lot of truancy? How's their English language proficiency? So this is really getting at whether or not you've done the research and understand the demographic that you're intending to serve. So you do want to be making sure that you are looking at actual data for that student population, and talk about how you're going to build a better mousetrap, basically. So, and these are all the bullet points, like I was explaining. It's not just these here, it's also these: explain any special factors influence their makeup, explain how the educational philosophy is designed to meet their needs, explain how the instructional methods have been designed to meet the needs of your at-risk students, and how is the yearly and daily schedule designed to meet their needs. Next slide. Instructional services and supports for students with IEPs. So you are going to have students with IEPs. You will have to be serving them on day one of every school year. But you don't really, particularly in your first year, you won't have all of the funding that those students are generating until the 40th day rolls around, the official count day. So you should probably all be seeing a boost after the 40th day to incorporate the kids who enroll that have an IEP. Unless your business manager convinces you to increase your projected enrollment to cover the costs of those kids, I would just recommend that you maybe ask them, are they being overly ambitious with those numbers, and should you have a backup number that's a little bit lower so that you can be more realistic? So how are you going to identify and provide for those students? So thinking about structurally, you don't get that information on the lottery, you get that on enrollment paperwork. What are the steps the school is going to take to ensure that these students are getting the services, both for the kids who have deficiencies and the gifted kids? So how are you going to ensure that you're not over-identifying English language learners as special ed students? That is happening. That happens always. And you want to be the school that does not do that. And you're not over-identifying a student who's an English language learner as a special ed. You can be a special ed student and English is not your first language, but English not being your first language does not make you a special ed student. So you have to identify specific responsibilities for school staff, classroom teachers, and special education staff. Identify specific training and support that will be provided to teachers and school staff to ensure that they are fully aware of their responsibilities. Next slide. You have to, this is continued. You have to describe your timeline, benchmarks, and people responsible for developing the discipline policies and protocols for your special populations. I've said many times in the past, I think that you would be good to start from the standpoint of you've got a 100% special population school and like build your policies from there, right? So I've yet to see a policy written to serve the needs of a special ed kid and discipline that wouldn't be fine for a regular ed kid as well. But you have to have both policies. So the capacity of the school district in the geographic boundaries of the proposed school to provide educational services and FAPE. So you've got, some of you are proposing virtual or hybrid options, and you'll have to think about this because you can get a virtual student from anybody, right? Any part of the state. So you really have to be thinking about the state for your numbers and your demographics, with a focus on the traditional district in which you're going to be located as well. But the rest of you who are locating and you're going to have an in-person kind of school, you're really looking at the geographic boundaries of the district in which you're locating. Also thinking about how you're going to track the population's progress. How are you going to track it? How are you going to report it to the board? How is the board going to hold the head administrator responsible for ensuring that all of this work gets done? Next slide. How are you going to monitor and evaluate those special ed kids? So one of the things that, you'll have to be providing to a board once you're open is reports on how well the different demographics are doing academically. I think having, it's not something you necessarily have information to report out every month, but I think that it would be a good plan to have, I'm going to talk about early in the school year, I can talk about my special ed kids. I can talk to my board about last year and how we did with special ed kids, what the difference is between the number of special ed kids we had last year and this year, and moving forward. Same type of thing with English language learners. Other academic data you really can't get until you've done assessments, but thinking about that. So how are you going to monitor that? How are you going to track that? How are you going to report that out? What are you going to do that on an annual basis? Are you going to do that how often? How will the board be evaluating the effectiveness of your special education program, right? Is what it looks like at the state level is that you get students in who are underperforming and they just stay there. So that's what it looks like at the state level data. Your school will have the ability to have data that shows, say you have, I'm just going to make it easier for myself, 10 level C kids who have IEPs, and they're all going to be individual, they're all going to be different. But say that on average, those 10 kids are 3 years behind their grade level. And by the end of a academic year with your school, you now have only, only say half of those kids have gained 2 grade levels, so now they're only 1 grade level behind. That type of data, like we took 50% of this group and grew them this much. That's not data that the state provides through their vistas. It's annual assessment, but you would have that data, and your board should be asking those kind of questions. You get one bucket of money, right? Your students have generated that bucket by their grade, by their English language learner status, by their socioeconomic status, by their demographic of, are they Black? Are they Asian? Are they Hispanic? Are they, Native? What are they? So the money all comes in one bucket. I would personally be asking my business manager, how much of the SEG that we receive is generated by my special ed kids? How much revenue is generated by the English language learners? So that you can understand if we're getting if X% of our SEG is generated for our special ed program, are we spending that entire amount, or are we spending less than that amount? Or are we spending more than that amount? What data is it? Like, how effective is your program? That is the board's role, to be really pushing the head administrator with, is it working? Is what we thought going to be the answer to education in the state of New Mexico, is it working? And if it's not working, why not? What are the barriers to it? And how can we do a better job? So how is it going to be tracked, measured, ensured, and reported? Next slide. Basically the same thing for English language learners. Next slide. So monitoring and evaluating evaluating English language learners, there's a very specific requirement that there's multiple specific requirements. So with English language learners, you're going to need to do either receive from the school that the child has come from their assessment of whether or not they, Lucy, help me, I'm forgetting what the assessment is called, that we only give to students once.
LUS?
Yes, the
LUS?
language usage survey.
The
Thank you.
access assessment?
The language usage survey. So the language usage survey only is given to a student once when they enter public school. So if you're getting a kindergartner in, you're the one who's giving them that language usage survey. That's hard to say for me. If you are getting students from another school, say you've got, sixth graders, that should be part of the packet of information that's coming to them from the school they went to for fifth grade, or wherever they started. So, and then so you have to have a program. So you've got these English language learners, right? They're learning in class in English. You're also teaching them in their EL classes how to use academic English, right? They need to have a grasp of academic English so that they can be doing better in their classroom. Once a kid tests at proficiency and with the WIDA access test, you have to monitor them for 2 more years to make sure that they don't lose any of those gains. So building that in to the reports that the board requires is a good strategy to make sure that it gets done. Next slide. Your plan to adhere to ESSA and state statutes. And don't you love how it's much smaller now because there's so much in this? So describe how your proposed school will do all these things. Develop an educational framework to address the needs of Native American, Hispanic, Black, bilingual, multicultural students with culturally and linguistically responsive approach to learning. Identify specific responsibilities for the staff and the teachers, including professional development. All the best practices used in teaching, mentoring, counseling, administration. Ensure that your policies are cultural and linguistically responsive. We have the Hair Act passed here as well. You cannot put in your policies that students can't wear their hair in a natural style. You can't tell a child they can't wear a head covering if it's a cultural head covering. Heaven forbid anything. I don't know. Like, I'm glad that I'm not running a school that I didn't have a lot of kids that came to school in hats. But they need to be, they're human beings and they need to be given some autonomy over themselves. And there's no place, it was this century in Albuquerque that a public school teacher cut a Native American student's hair and made fun of them. And that just shouldn't never happen, never, ever happen. So, you can have policies about what they wear. They can't have violent imagery on their shirts and stuff like that, but you can't say they can't have blue hair. What's your demonstrate rigorous and culturally meaningful curricula and instructional materials will be developed and implemented. Identify the regular intervals at which progress will be monitored. Identify specific actions and reporting that will engage students and or their families. evaluate the effectiveness of the programs to improve educational outcomes. And I cannot stress that enough. All of these things, the board should be asking for reports from the head administrator at some point throughout the year to help you stay on track with being compliant. Next slide. Your assessment plan. So again, what's your calendar going to be? You've got to identify all the state mandated assessments and then what you are going to mandate. You are the district in this instance. So what are your mandated interim assessments? What grade levels are going to be assessed when? Describe how the data identified will be used to inform the instruction. How your school's philosophy will be on using that data to onboard teachers and provide support to them. It has to align with all the state assessment and data reporting requirements, and describe how your assessment plan will meet the specific needs to equitably assess the school's projected student population. So it's a lot of stuff. Next slide. And then your plan to analyze. So we ask you to tell us how you're going to use the analyzed data, and that the first question and then the second question, it's so important we are asking it again. What are you going to do with it? Right? Data is only data. You have to use it. How are you going to use it to improve outcomes? And so, you know, the New Mexico Vistas, the statewide assessment, that's not helping. You got to analyze that. You got to see where your holes are, but it doesn't really help the kids that took the test, right? So there's the interim assessments that should be working at like, okay, you know, this is how these kids did on this interim assessment. What can you do now in the classroom to be addressing those needs? Versus, you know, what do we as a school holistically need to do to help our kids with a statewide assessment? Next slide. Plan for student progress and achievement communication. So this one should be relatively easy compared to all the other ones, because this is just how are you going to communicate it out to the parents? What's your plan to inform students, parents, the governing body, your authorizer, the broader community? I think this is, you know, an opportunity to think about how you do promote the school to the community. And you know, it's easy. It should be easy to tell your students. It should be easy to tell your parents, right? That's usually like parent-teacher conferences, the governing body. You're going to be telling them that when once a year, once a semester, quarterly. What are you going to tell them? And then the broader community is more like, you know, how are you going to use your success as a recruitment tool type of thing? How are you going to promote the school throughout your broader community? Next slide. So nobody's replicating. So this is not applicable to any of you. Next slide. All right. Any questions? It's so quiet.
Missy, there is one more slide on institutional knowledge, by the way.
Oh, where? Oh, yeah. Next slide.
It's after this.
So the thing that we see happening with our existing charter schools is that when you don't know what you're doing, or you're not tracking information, you're not actively planning for what's coming next, you're really lost. And a school is an entity. The entity exists. It has responsibilities, it has rights. It doesn't have a memory. It doesn't have a way of speaking for itself. It has a board. It has a head administrator. How can the board and the head administrator ensure that the institution, the entity itself, has an institutional memory? It's only as good as the people who are proposing the school and going to do the work. It is important. You should be working towards building something that technically isn't going to die. It should continue as long as there's a need in your community. It should outlive every single one of us that's in this Zoom right now. So how do you ensure that the institutional memory maintains? Transitions for schools are dangerous and scary times. It's trying to think about, and it's, you can write the best application, the most clear plan that's ever been written before, and a future board and head administrator could completely rewrite it. And that's just a fact. But the more clear you are and the more sure you are of your plan, and the more you build into it how people should maintain it, I think the better. So thinking now as a founder, how are you going to replace yourself as the founding head administrator? What steps do you want that board that you don't know yet to take? You write it here. You make sure that it's in your application. If you get approved, you'll write it in your policies in the implementation year. Founders are how a charter school launches. You have to have somebody crazy enough and passionate enough to do this. But then founders can also get in the way of an existing school once they start running. And so it's a delicate balance between, really writing out what it is you want. But you have to be thinking about this is a legal entity that has to have an institutional memory. And it's only going to be as good as you make it. And so do yourself and your future school a favor by making sure that you are being very deliberative in your thinking and writing of this plan. Again, a founding head administrator in particular, leaving a school can be very stressful on a school. When a new head administrator comes in, what are they going to be? Are they going to be somebody who's coming from outside of the school and might want to put their stamp on your school? Or are they somebody grown within? There's basically two types of transitions. There's planned and there's unplanned. And just have an understanding that is how some schools really end up tanking themselves, because they have chosen a new head administrator that's changing the entire culture of the school. So if you don't plan and describe what those processes should be at this stage, there's not going to be a better stage to do that. There's not ever going to be an easier time. This is the easiest it gets And so this is when you have hopefully the time and the energy to be really thinking about this in a deep way, not in a surface way of getting through this first hump and into your implementation year, but in a really thoughtful way so that you are building the best possible school you can. So that is all I have for you today, or we have for you. Ted will PDF the presentation and send it out to you. We'll get the recording processed and up on the YouTube. And we'll see you next month. Is everybody on track for their facilities master plan? Yay. All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guy. Good presentation. Appreciate it.